So when you're actually filming a video game as opposed to a movie, it's a very different process. It's actually with a movie you actually start out with a script, and then you take from the script and then you work sort of down from that. On a video game, it's the complete opposite way around. At least that's how I did it on Black Ops 2, where you actually start out with a design of a game. And you start out with environments and levels, then create the characters, create the character arcs, and then eventually you'll come up with a story structure, and it will all then ultimately feed into a script. So it's actually the reverse of what you would expect when making a movie. When you're actually sort of on set and you're actually doing the filming, very different process, because the way we film our scenes, we don't have to worry about camera work. We don't have to worry about lighting. We just have these actors dressed in these sort of weird suits in this sort of huge sound stage with 250 infrared cameras just staring at them. And we have to craft our performances out of that environment, very much like black box theatre. And in movies, it's very different because the cameras are fixed and they have to spend a lot of time on lighting and that sort of stuff. I think the actors kind of like working on the video game stuff sometimes because there's not so much waiting involved. Because when you're making a movie, you have to wait for lighting rigs to be set up, all kinds of equipment shifts and things like that. Once we have the scripts together, we can keep rolling pretty efficiently, and I think they like that. One of the things I'm the most proud of is how the branching story element of the game turned out. It really is something unique for Call of Duty and even first-person shooters, I think. The way it works is that when you're going through the story, there will be main characters who will live or die depending on the decisions you make. And this isn't stuff that all sort of happens in one scene right at the end of the game. This is throughout the game as you're playing it. There's a villain who has his own thing going on, and you have opportunities to interfere with that along the way. There's a Cold War between America and China, which in the Strike Force levels, you actually get the opportunity to affect the outcome of that overall war, which then has other implications on the story. So you have all these sort of different things going on, and it's all handled within the story. And actually, the funny thing is, I watched two people actually play the finished game last week. I mean, there's a bunch of people playing it, but these two specifically I encountered having a conversation. They just finished. One guy was talking to another guy about this scene at the end of the game. And they were talking about it, and then one guy's like, well, what are you talking about? That didn't happen. And the guy's like, yes, it did. And he's like, you're BSing me, there's no way that could have happened. But the version of the scene he was talking about had different alternatives in it. And that's exactly the kind of discussion that I wanted to provoke. A real water cooler moment where you have people talking about, well, I did this, you did this, did you see this? What happened to this character? Did he live? Did he die? It's pretty interesting to see the reactions. So I can tell you, we always try and evolve the story with every version of the game that we do. And when I set out from the start of every one of these games, I want to make it clear from the start what is going to be different about it. And it has to evolve, because people will not be satisfied, and rightly so, with doing the same thing over and over again. I think we have to do different things. And I can tell you already, for whatever we do next, we will do different again. And we will push this as hard as we can. It's one of the most exciting things about video games, I think, because if you look at like a medium like film, film's been around for like 100 years, and so much has been tried and experimented with, and there's only so many things you can do at the end of the day with a medium like that. You look at video games, which the industry's been around for 30 years or so, it's still kind of in its infancy. It's kind of like, I like to use this analogy of, I can see what's happened with movies where, the evolution of movies is like man going to the moon. It's an incredible achievement, but it's been done. And I look at video games and where video games are going, and I sort of compare that to man going to Mars. It's out there, it's a frontier, it's stuff that we haven't tried and explored, and there's so many different things from a storytelling point of view that you can do. I'm really excited about that. Yeah, we drew inspiration from many films. I can tell you, for me personally, one of the most important aspects for Black Ops 2, with most of it being set in 2025, was for that future world to feel very authentic and believable, and feel like it could be an extension of the world we have today, essentially. And there's many films I drew on. Like you look at like the work of Ridley Scott, And his stuff to me always feels like that. Anything he's done in the future, it's not all sort of glossy and shiny and, you know, it's more, it's real. It's imagining how these technologies would actually eventually turn out. And that's what we really tried to do on Black Ops 2. We didn't want to present this as a world that people couldn't relate to. We want it to feel like, yeah, I could see the world we have today, push it out a few years, I could see how this stuff could happen. I can tell you, the thing I am most excited about on Black Ops 2 is the branching stories. And I can't wait for when the game is released and I see the reaction from the fans, when we have all these different people playing the game, and you know, they're all getting different endings and they're posting videos and they're discussing it, and I want it to feel like they've played this game and had an experience that they've not been able to get from a game before quite in this way. And I just can't wait to see that reaction from people. Sure, well when we made the decision to set the game in 2025, it was critically important to us that this still needs to feel like a boots on the ground game. It still needs to feel like something that could happen in the world today has just been extrapolated out a few years. And right from the start, I knew we needed a really strong consultant to help us sort of envisage that future. So we contacted a guy called Peter Singer, who wrote this book called Wired for War, which is an amazing book. It's a great read. And it's all about, you know, what sort of technology and robotics and weapons are all going to look like in the next 10 to 15 years. And it's an extrapolation from where we're at today and what's being prototyped right now. And the other thing about Peter is he's an expert in geopolitics. He actually is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute in Washington, which is a think tank for the US government. So whenever, you know, President Obama has a problem, like, he consults these think tanks to, you know, what's the world going to be looking like in the next 10 years? Like, what's the conflict going to be over? So in a weird way, you know, people in the government have kind of a similar problem to what I had when I started this game, which is I need to know what the world's going to look like in the next 10 years. So, you know, I talked to David Goyer about it, and we thought, you know, what better way than to actually use the same people that the government uses to actually figure this stuff out. So Peter was just a gold mine for this sort of thing, because you get the benefit of both. You get his insight into technology, of which he's an expert, and his insight into geopolitics, of which he is absolutely, I mean, you can talk to him all day and never get bored. He just reams off, you know, event after event after event, and it's really quite fascinating when you actually understand where the world is heading.